Some people don't disappear suddenly. They don't withdraw dramatically. They don't announce that something is wrong. They become less visible slowly, through repetition, through accommodation, through silence. Not because they want to be unseen, but because being noticed stopped feeling safe. Over time, this kind of quiet neglect doesn't just shape how someone relates to others, it reshapes how they relate to themselves. It teaches restraint, self-editing, emotional economy. This isn't a conversation about blame, or labels, or confrontation. It's a conversation about how this pattern forms and what it quietly costs over time. If this feels familiar, there's nothing you need to do while listening. This is simply a space where the experience is named. Quiet neglect often doesn't look like mistreatment. It looks like absence. Not being asked follow-up questions, not being checked in on unless something goes wrong, not having reactions mirrored back. Over time, a person notices this. They begin to shorten their stories. They stop offering context. They speak less about what matters and more about what's neutral. Not consciously at first. It's subtle. A pause before speaking. A recalculation, a quiet decision to let something pass. Over time, this becomes a way of being. The person doesn't feel silenced, they feel practical, efficient, low maintenance. But what's really happening is a gradual narrowing of expression. Not because they don't have depth, but because depth no longer feels welcome. This pattern doesn't form from one moment. It forms through repetition, a response that never quite lands, a feeling that isn't picked up, a concern that's met with distraction or dismissal. Each instance is small, but together they teach something very specific. They teach the nervous system to conserve, to speak less, to feel less publicly, to notice without revealing. What looks like composure on the outside often begins as adaptation on the inside. Over time, the body learns that being noticeable comes with a cost, so it learns restraint instead, not as a choice, but as a response. Quiet neglect doesn't leave visible marks. It leaves internal ones. A person may become highly self-aware, careful with timing, attuned to atmosphere. They can read rooms well. They sense shifts early. They notice what others miss. But this comes at a cost. Expression becomes work. Connection feels effortful. Rest rarely feels complete. There's often a low-grade exhaustion that doesn't have a clear source. Not burnout, not overwhelm, just a steady tiredness that comes from carrying too much internally for too long. Over time, this can lead to disconnection, not only from others, but from oneself. Not emptiness, but distance. It's important to say this clearly. This pattern wasn't a failure. It was functional. In environments where attention felt conditional, where expression felt inconvenient, where needs weren't met consistently, becoming less visible made sense. It reduced friction. It preserved calm. It kept relationships intact. What protected you then may simply be outdated now. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it understandable. Removing shame here matters because shame keeps people silent longer. Awareness doesn't arrive dramatically. It often arrives quietly. A moment of noticing how much is being held back, a realization that certain spaces feel safer than others, a recognition of how automatic self-editing has become. There's no rush here. Awareness doesn't demand action, it creates space. Space to notice internal reactions, space to feel without explanation, space to exist without performance. This is often where something softens, not externally, but internally, and that shift matters. Quiet neglect makes people invisible slowly, not because they lack presence, but because presence once felt costly. If parts of this resonated, there's nothing to resolve right now. Understanding is enough. Sometimes naming the experience is the first moment of being seen. And that in itself carries weight.